good evening, everyone, and welcome to an evening of first. This is the first international concert of Houston Tuesday Musical Club, starring the eminent John Sharpley. It's the first time we've met this season for an evening, but I confess it's the only one. And it's the first time that we'll hear the voice, the beautiful voice in this season, of Dominique McCormick. If this is the first time you're visiting with us, I hope it will not be the last. And we'll talk later after the program on how you can enjoy the rest of the programs for the season. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie, who will introduce John Sharpley. And I hope you enjoy every single minute. Talk to you later.
So thank you very much, Susan. And if you want to go ahead and mute yourself, we'll go ahead and continue with the meeting. I would like to introduce my friend since childhood, actually, John Sharpley. He is an accomplished, wonderful pianist, but also was a very good violinist when we were growing up. I don't know if you still play violin, John. You can let us know later. He's saying yes. So I knew him from HSPVA orchestras and All City Orchestra. And we have kept up over the years. And I understand that his mother's been also a member of the Houston Tuesday Musical Club. She is a wonderful piano teacher. John, what interests me about John is that he went to school in Boston and then studied in France. And then for virtually all of his career, he was been in Singapore. And I know he's very attracted to the sounds of music from that part of the world, and it's now become synthesized with his Western training in his music. And so what I'm actually going to ask John to do at first is explain to us why he did not like the title of the meeting tonight. I thought I would do a play on American in Paris, and I called it American in Singapore, and John had a reason for not liking that, and it actually informs the way we listen to his music. So John, may I ask you to unmute? Let me know if you have any trouble doing that, and carry on.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for having me. I would have to say good morning because it's now the next day, and I can assure you all that the sun will rise. I have evidence of it here, so there will be a next day. It's great to see you all, and your question is great. I think when Gershwin wrote An American in Paris, the world was a different place. And I think we can all agree the world is a very different place now. And my life has always been the pursuit of unity, of connectivity from within ourselves to family, to city, to peoples, to cultures, the planet. And it goes even beyond that. It goes with nature, you know, with the cosmos itself. I'm interested in the cosmos. I'm interested in our connection and how are we connected, not how we're disconnected, not our divisions, but our connection. So for me, the idea, and I think this is part of a new world that we're entering into, the kind of nationalism that was very prominent mid 20th century, early 20th century, I think particularly the need for nationalism is understood. If we look at it in a bigger context of history and the birth of republics and the need for republics to assert their identity. It's an existential question, isn't it? And going to the 19th century with the birth of nations, you know, the idea of republics is not really that old. I don't think that Palestrina thought of himself as being an Italian nationalist composer, whereas Verdi did. And there are very good reasons for that. But we move into a very different space now. And I think looking at our connection, our oneness, without losing our individuality, I think is very important for the planet, for humanity to move forward. So I must say, since I was a child, I've always thought a great deal about our connectivity. So travel for me has been a very important part of that. My first big trip was at about 17, and I spent the whole summer in the Middle East. And from that point onwards, it was more about, well, who are we? A very existential kind of question. Who are we, and what is our connection? So that led to living in France for a few years. I also lived in Australia for a little while. I've been in Singapore, has been my home for 35 years then. I have a foundation in Kathmandu in Nepal, so I spend quite a bit of time in Nepal. Southeast Asia has figured very prominently in my life. I have a collection of about 300 instruments. Later I'll talk about one. This is one of them. This is a sape from Borneo. And I think that to answer that question, an American in Singapore is anachronistic. To me, it doesn't make sense anymore, because I'm a human, and I'm even more than that. I'm an earthling, and I belong to this larger space. I don't want to make it a smaller space. So in fact, it's not denying anything. It's actually including everything. So it's a different perspective. So I hope that answers your question about why an American in Singapore is less interesting. We are truly a global world, and in fact, as I see all of you, and I see the various boxes that you're in, and we're in various time zones, it's a reminder. What I think we're experiencing now is what I'm talking about. It's harmony. It's also counterpoint. It's very musical, and we are, at this point, we come together and there's a certain oneness, and I think that's very beautiful. In addition, whatever is said or heard, I think there's an energy in this kind of communication that is quite special, and I think it's also part of a new emerging, if you wish, even civilization that we're moving into. So from there, Debbie, do you have any, you want to get me started?
So the first thing on your agenda was to talk about your opera Kannagi. And is that the way you say it? If you can explain what that means.
Yes, okay. We have some music to share, and I chose various selections to illustrate my involvement or participation and interest in the musics of humanity. And this is an opera. I love opera, and I've written a number of operas and produced. This is an opera that's based on a Tamil story, which is a South Indian story, a woman whose name is Kannagi. And it's an epic story. She has suffered a great deal in her life, and injustice largely, and yet she remains quite true to herself. And in this story, her truthfulness and her pursuit of compassion and goodness brings upon her an epiphany. And in that epiphany, which may be called Brahman, and Brahman is a 2,500-year-old, if not older, Hindu concept of reality, that the physical world, the world that we see and touch and smell, the world that we believe is tangible, is actually a construct. And that beneath that is energy, the non-physical world. And that's called Brahman. Brahman is that emergence of the physical universe. And what's so fascinating is that the Upanishads and the great text in India of 2,500 years ago talked about this very thing that physicists today, astrophysicists, can actually make an absolute connection to. And my first realization of that was an incredible book that perhaps really helped to kickstart me by Fritjof Capra, called The Tao of Physics. And in that he showed this connection of subatomic world before the world becomes physical. And so it is something that other cultures, and I think even mystic traditions, have had a deep sense of this, beyond time and space. So in this particular opera, the climax of the opera is when she makes this transition into complete oneness with the cosmos, understanding the fullness of that. So a little bit about the excerpt that we'll take a look at. This is my most recent work. It was performed by the Singapore Symphony Orchestra back in August, and we were in strict lockdown at the time. And I felt it was quite heroic that the symphony wanted to go ahead with this concert. It also celebrated National Day in Singapore. And why this work and why me? Because this represents a part of the intra and multiculturalism of Singapore. It's an extremely multicultural world with a great deal of Chinese culture, Indian culture, Malay culture, Eurasian culture, you name it. It's all a melting pot here. And so this represented this influence of Indian culture here. And originally I wanted to bring in a singer, and that was not allowed because of aerosols. So I have a movement of the opera which is danced. And in this moment, Kannagi as a dancer, and she's dancing, you'll see a Bharatanatyam dancer. So this is a South Indian classical dance. It's her moment of epiphany. And she struggles between the violence that has just happened, very stormy. The city of Madurai has gone up in flames, and it's been a very violent kind of moment. And from that violence, she has the epiphany of the oneness of all things. So it's the contradiction of these two things. And that's what this captures. So maybe we could take a look at it. I also understand there may be some issues with the video. So we may just watch a little bit of it. I'd like to say it was conducted by Daryl Ong, and the Bharatanatyam dancer was Shirja Govinda then. And we played to an empty concert hall. So our premier venue of the Esplanade Concert Hall, which seats about 1,400 people, was completely darkened out. And even the dancer, because of COVID-19, had to be in another studio. She couldn't even be together with the musicians. So to me, it's very symbolic of our effort to move on and to make things work, to be creative. So it was wonderful to be a part of that, because I felt it was, in a way, it was a certain defiance to COVID-19 in the sense of saying, well, we will find other ways. We will move forward then. And the opera was premiered in an Indian temple, and that was quite extraordinary. And it's had several productions since then, various points of view, and I'd hope to bring it to the U.S. sometime.
Wow.
So,
John, I have a question. What language did you write the opera in?
English.
English, okay.
Yeah. My operas are in English. However, I do have one opera that mixes a bit of Malay and Hokkien, which is a Chinese dialect then. That's only because it takes place in Singapore.
Very good, thanks.
So John, it looked like you were going to go back to your Texas roots with the next piece, which is from the Lone Star Suite, your blues.
Yes, I'd spent so much of my life searching the world that at some point I came to the realization that I needed to search my home too. And what are the cultural influences, particularly in Texas? You know, everybody knows the Six Flags of Texas. What are the six cultures of Texas? You know, what is there in the roots? And so I began to explore, and I began to reread history books, and I realized that what I was taught as a child was completely different than really how we understand now. My point of view has completely reset itself. And so this materialized in a work for piano, which actually I premiered at the Texas Music Teachers Association convention. I was the 2007 Composer of the Year for TMTA. And so there are two movements I wanted to share. What do we have first? We have the blues. Here's the score of the blues. And what I was interested in, I'm always interested in what lies underneath the surface, what lies under the surface of our skin, what lies under the surface of our words, what lies under the surface of our actions. In a way, it's very similar to Ibsen in Peer Gynt and the idea of the onion and peeling the onion and peeling the onion until there's nothing there. And I'm also most interested in nothing, literally and figuratively. So you'll notice in this, about midway or so, things seem to fall apart. Fall apart meaning we create a surface, a veneer, if you wish, which sounds familiar. It sounds like the blues, right? It has the familiar riffs and the familiar harmonies and syncopations. However, at some point, you clear that and you look beyond that into something else, and that even includes some musing inside the piano. So it's as if for a moment you're perceiving something entirely different. And I would say this is a certain theme in my work, that there's a lot more that meets the eye, a lot more that meets the ear, beyond our senses. And then it does sort of spin and spiral until it returns back to where we were before. But you know, there's a certain saying in Buddhism that, you know, when a mountain is a mountain, and when you have a certain epiphany, it's not a mountain anymore. And then after your epiphany, it's a mountain again. And that's also a certain reoccurring theme for me. So maybe we could listen now to some of the blues. that was me playing. And I think maybe looking towards the next work, which is something for Chinese orchestra. It's a whole nother world out there, the Chinese orchestra with Chinese instruments. And the Singapore Chinese Orchestra, which we're going to hear a video clip playing, is possibly one of the greatest, the most renowned Chinese orchestras in the world, even in comparison to Chinese orchestras in China. And I got this commission with a very interesting caveat that I would write something that expressed Nanyang. And I don't expect any of you to know what Nanyang means, but it's a word that means South Seas in Chinese, in reference to Southeast Asia. And you know, the demographics are really interesting here because Southeast Asia is layered so many, it goes back thousands of years of cultures of China and India and Malay and Thai and Portuguese and French and English, British and American, and it's all just I could talk for hours about what I know, which is, I think, very, very small, but of the history of Southeast Asia. It's absolutely amazing. And so I was asked to somehow communicate that in some ways. And I said, my best experience is not as so much about how should I say, all these big cultures, but I was interested in the indigenous people of the rainforest and the rainforest. And by the way, that's my favorite place to be, is the rainforest. I adore being in the rainforest. The sounds and the smells and the sensuality of the rainforest is unbelievable. And so I wrote a work called Stirrings, and it's inspired by the rainforest. And in fact, the Southeast Asian rainforest is, along with the Amazon, a huge ecological system that, as I understand, is one of the oldest continuous ecological systems on the planet. I may be wrong, but based on what I know and have read, this ecological system that I live in is about 70 million years old. Continuous ecological system, yeah? And yet, industries and governments continue to rape its land, you know, to deforest. It's a terrible thing. And I want to be champion for trees and for nature, who suffer unduly because of our own greed and selfishness. And I think that's a part of hopefully our awakening today, is just what that connectivity is. So we're going to listen to a selection. This is one particular movement that I was inspired by the indigenous people of Borneo. And I've been to Borneo a number of times. It's beautiful. It's part of both Malaysia and Indonesia. And even on one trip, my parents and I together went down a small motorboat down the Rajang River. This is like going down the Amazon in a sense. And we had a guide that took us to a longhouse, and we met with Iban people. This is out really in the sticks. And we experienced some of their culture and their rice wine, which was very strong. And I remember my mother, she's there, hi mom, she didn't like it at all, but she felt it was socially correct to drink it anyways. And one of the instruments there that's very popular in Borneo is this. It has 3 strings, and this is called the sape. It's an indigenous instrument of a number of the native tribal people of Borneo. And what I did, I transferred the idea of the sape and music for the sape to the sanchen. And the sanchen, you'll see in this clip, is a Chinese instrument. San. San means 3. So sanchen is a 3-stringed lute. And that is featured in this movement, where I try to capture something of the indigenous people and their rice wine and the instrument called the sape. So this is performed by the Singapore Chinese Orchestra, conducted by Song Ye. That's the son chen that you see the woman playing. That 3-string instrument is the instrument I'm referring to. These instruments you see are called the erhu. They're part of the family. It's a bowed stringed instrument. That's a suona that you hear, Chinese suona. But you know, you might wonder, okay, is that Asian music? And actually, it's not. It's like a foreign language. You might think, oh, that sounds this or that, or maybe it sounds Chinese. Trust me, to somebody steeped in traditional Chinese music, that does not sound Chinese. Nor does it necessarily sound like it's from Borneo. But I think, how do we find our language then in that sense? It's kind of, I think this whole idea of language is a very interesting thing. And one of the things the conductor talked to me about, I see a question about flutes are diatonic. Yes, but the di zi, which is a flute, the flutes are in different keys. So they're not chromatic, if that answers your question then about the flutes. And so learning the instruments and writing something that is working with these instruments is a very fascinating process. And my aim is I don't want it to sound Chinese or for it to sound this. I'm not even interested in it sounding Asian. I'm really only interested in what my instinct tells me or what my intuition tells me on this. So the conductor, Song Ye, was quite interested because he felt it was a very unique sound for the instrument. So I think that there's so much music yet to be written, so much yet to do, because we do live in a world of infinite possibilities.
John, at this point, someone asked a question which we asked you when we did our practice Zoom, and it was one I did want to make sure you answered. It is, how did you decide to reside in Singapore? And you had a great answer.
I had a dream. I literally had a dream. I was completing my doctorate in Boston at the time. And At that point, I was actually considering other possibilities of going back to France. I had a job offer in Rio de Janeiro. I had a group in Boston. I was very active in the new music scene in Boston at that time. This is like mid 80s, 84 or so. Maybe toying with the idea of moving to New York. But I had a dream. And in this dream, I actually lived in a very big Asian city. And I saw the people, I actually saw the city in my dream. And I woke up with the absolute knowledge that I was going to live in that city, but I had no idea what city it was. I had no clue. But you know, when you have a feeling, you just have a gut feeling. I'm sure you've all had that sense before. And that very day in the halls of Boston University, Ethan Sloan, who was the director of the School of Music at the time, came up to me and asked this question: how would you like to live in Singapore? And it was an epiphany moment for me. I think because I had the dream, I was emboldened to say, yes, 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 yes. And so when I looked up Singapore, and I can verify this. I know it's an anecdote. You can't prove it scientifically, can you? But what I saw in my dream was what I could see in images of Singapore. And I did not know at the time the racial mix of Singapore, but that's what I saw in my dream. So I actually saw it in this dream, which gave me full confidence that it was a yes. I think we all have experiences like that, and we have to trust our dreams. 35 years ago.
I've had only one truly mystical experience, which I'll tell you about later after the meeting. But I don't have a lot of them, but I did have one. So you were going to mention your interest in Native American music with your next piece, Round Dance.
When I was a child, I used to go in the backyard, swing on the swing, and muse on who lived there centuries ago, millennia ago. What was this land? I was very interested in that, but I had no way of understanding it. And the thinking at that time was just all negative about that, what that past was. And that just subsided. And I remember some years later, I read Dvorak. As you all know, Antonin Dvorak had a position in New York in the 1890s. He was director of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, and he was also head of the American National Conservatory, which doesn't exist now. And he made trips out to the West, and he proclaimed in some articles something that disturbed so many of the elite American classical music domain. And he said that the future of American music, this is in the 1890s, that the future of American music was in the traditions of the African Americans, of the traditions of the spirituals, and he knew about ragtime, so he felt that's where the essence would be. But also, he said, in Native American culture. And at that time, much of the genocide was already well in place, as we know. Natalie Curtis did an incredible study. She was an American musicologist. Maybe some of you have heard of her. And in the 1890s, she single-handedly went out into the American West, and she got permission from Native chiefs and to learn their songs. And she got permission from them to transcribe their songs and to write of their myths and to create an incredible book, an amazing book that actually preserves this heritage. This is our great heritage then. When I came across that, I just felt this was something so important. I feel very connected. I've always been very connected, particularly to shamanism and the mystical, the mystic experience, healing. And it's so blatant, it's so obvious in other cultures. It's only, if I may say, in our consumer commercialized, physicalized world that this is almost, it's just been deleted. It's deleted. You can't even talk about it sometimes without all kinds of baggage. But in other cultures, it can still remain quite evident and quite pure and quite connected to everything else then. And so this is a round dance that we're going to listen to. It's also a part of the suite. And I'd like to read the text. It's a Pawnee song, and it belonged to Letacots Lesa, who is the Eagle Chief. This is late 19th century, and the text comes from a dream. And in the dream, he saw the night sky with all of its stars. And at that time, he saw the night stars as the American flag. And he wrote in this song, translation into English, I saw it, yea, I saw it. I saw it, yea, I saw it. In very truth, I saw it. In very truth, I saw it. 'Twas the starry banner beautiful. 'Twas the starry banner beautiful. And there he's trying to find a way of making peace with Washington, DC, the government, and that there would be harmony. And so many believed that, and that's what the round dance was. It was a dance of harmony and peace, and there was a strong belief and a growing belief amongst many of Native Americans at that time that there would be some healing. Of course, we all know the history, don't we? But it's not too late. It's never too late to have healing. So this is round dance for piano that I'm playing. I really offer this as a song of healing for all. And I think particularly for America, I think it's a time that America is in great need of healing, and that the world can rally around and support the need for healing in America. I think this is a very critical time to do that, and to look beyond all of our shores and to see the oneness in all things. And several years ago, I gave a piano recital in Kathmandu, in the big Russian Cultural Center. And I played a set of Native American songs. This was not part of that particular set. And I was, one of my big connections to Nepal also is, and Tibet, is this connection to ritual and spiritual pursuit. And I was quite taken by the audience's response to the Native American songs. And many felt it was so similar to their own, not in language, but to the concept in their own healing songs and their own notions of the power of sound. Sound is incredibly powerful. And we have harmonic resonance with that sound, with the vibrations of that sound. So I hope this, and this is something that preoccupies me right now too, in all of my work, that it be music of healing, even if it's cathartic. But I think we need that, and we need to move forward.
So John, we probably ought to do a brief introduction to your last piece, which is from your oratorio, A Moment of Rest Upon the Wind.
Yeah. This is a setting of Khalil Gibran, the prophet. It's an hour-long oratorio, even though it began as one song. It began as a wedding song. A number of years back, I wrote for some friends in London, and I played it for their wedding. With a singer, wonderful singer, and it began as one song, and then it grew into a song cycle for tenor and piano, and I performed that several times with a great tenor. And then I thought, no, there's more to it. There's more, and then it evolved then into this hour-long oratorio for bass baritone, soprano. I actually bring in the character of Almitra, who is featured in The Prophet, as you may know it, and a narrator. So we're going to see the last scene, the last few minutes of this work, and you'll notice that the Yohei, who's and both of my singers are Japanese from Japan. He exits because in the last scene he's leaving the people of Orphalese, and the ship is coming to take him back, which symbolizes death. But he has such beautiful words to express, very, very inspiring words, I feel. And for those of you who have not read The Prophet by Gibran, please do, because it's so inspiring. And anybody who is involved in those incredible movements of the 1960s had probably two books in their back pocket. One was the Rubaiyat, and the other is The Prophet. And I've actually also written an opera that is based on the Rubaiyat. Omar Khayyam's The Rubaiyat. So I have quite a fascination with these works then. So this is the very end of this oratorio. It's performed by the Brattle Heights Symphony Orchestra, which is in fact a very good amateur orchestra here in Singapore and conducted by Adrienne Tan.
Vai, e vai longing, shall The seamen, and straightway they weighed anchor and cast the ship loose from its moorings, and they moved eastward. And a cry came from the people as from a single heart, and it rose the dusk and was carried out over the sea like a great trumpeting. Gazing after the ship until it had vanished into the mist. And when all the people were dispersed, she still stood alone upon the sea wall, remembering in her heart his saying,
Okay, I realize it was a bit surrealistic with the image, and I don't know how much you can hear. The volume was a little bit low, but I would say all of my music is really meant as a spiritual experience. This is really important. It's not about me. I'm not interesting, but it's about the journey, and it's about, perhaps for all of us, it's the journey, and what do we find along the way, and how do we communicate what we find along the way to others. And so for the artist, that is at the very heart of what we do.
Thanks so much for being here, John. I think Singapore is very lucky to have you, and now the rest of the world is hearing you.
Thank you.
I have now allowed people to unmute themselves if they'd like to ask a couple questions. We do have Dominique McCormick waiting in the wings. She will have a short piece also, which we will play after questions and answers to John. I hope Isabel will ask her question because it's the same one I had.
Yes, my first question was about the opera that we heard first with the dancer. And the music became very ominous and very, you know, a huge crescendo, and we don't know what's going on in the opera. So what is happening there?
The city is burning. She has been a part of the destruction of Madurai because of incredible injustice that has happened, that the king did without realizing it. And once it was realized, it's very epic. Her anger, her husband has been wrongly executed. She's lost everything. And a city is burning, so she is in this state. But at the same time, she makes this transformation of experiencing Brahman itself, a kind of epiphany of a mystical experience of a deeper reality of the cosmos. So
now
it's,
it makes sense.
it's mixing that together then. So, and the whole opera up to that point has been narrative, the story itself. So, and at that point, it's no longer the narrative. That's the third to the last scene. And then in the next scene is a cappella. She sings her own, this is her own spiritual, the actual transformation, where she actually becomes a part of the cosmos. And in the story, she becomes a goddess. She's transformed into becoming a goddess. And so in the very last scene, which is an anthem, a hymn to her as a goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And she's layered, her voice is layered 24 times in a counterpoint through, of course, it has to be pre-recorded. It's all quite cosmic. So the very last scene is quite a cosmic moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's the actual arrival place.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I hope you're well. Thank you so much, John Sharpley, for such an intriguing and interesting lecture. And I hope that you have a beautiful day in Singapore as you start your morning. And I hope that you've enjoyed talking to us. I know that many of you might already know me. I gave a presentation about 2 years ago with the musical club about Martial Caillebotte. And the Caillebotte name is pretty famous because Gustave Caillebotte is an impressionist painter who, during the Belle Epoque, started the Salon de Réfusés. He was a big supporter and financial backer for Monet, Degas, Renoir. And Gustave Caillebotte is the older brother of my dissertation composer that I wrote about, Martial Caillebotte. So I too lived in France for about 12 years, and I'm originally from New York. And when I was living in France, I performed as a professional soprano. I also worked as an assistant director of music at the American Cathedral in Paris. And in 2015, really 2013, I came back to America to pursue my doctorate in vocal performance and French literature. And that was the moment where I thought, this guy Martial Caillebotte that I heard about in France, who no one really knows, could be a really good dissertation topic, because why not? Might be an easy dissertation to write. 5 years later, not so much. But finally, my dissertation's done. The doctorate is finished. So yes, now you all know the doctorate is finished. So yay, that's done. And today I'm going to be presenting to you 2 melodies by Martial Caillebotte. They kind of border between melody and scène lyrique, which means kind of like a theatrical dramatic scene with music and very intense storyline or dramatic movement. So the first song, Attente, is written by a poet named L. Gillis, which is a pseudonym. So out of the research that I could do, and I believe you me, I dug really, really deep to find out who this poet was, and it was really, really difficult. Even with the French literature specialists in the Sorbonne, they didn't know who it was. But the most that I could know, most that I could really tell, is it's most likely a contemporary of Martial Caillebotte, probably a friend. And we also think it might have been a woman, because Attente's theme is done at the voice of a woman, in the point of view of women. And there's some lyrics in there that are a little bit intense and maybe at the time could have been considered raunchy. This is like at the turn of the 19th century, the Belle Epoque, and women poets and even composers weren't really that promoted. So I think we all think anyway that it might have been a woman. So there are about 4 stanzas in this, and it starts off with Mohammed and his wife, and she's singing, just kind of setting up the atmosphere. It's a beautiful day in the Douar in the village. And she's hearing the prayers of the Meuzine and the Prophet Allah. We're all singing off to him. And then she goes into the 3rd stanza where she's begging her husband to come back to her. He has left her for another woman, and she is just desperate to have him back. And the wonderful thing about Martial Caillebotte's writing is just his amazing ability to word paint. He is highly thematic, not just rhythmically, but motivically and musically. And his use of melodic shift, tonal shifts, reflect the change of temperament and dramatic intent of the poem. So she's crying to him, je te veux, which back then, that type of phrasing was a very intense, I want you, almost in a sexual way. And she most likely doesn't get him at the end. So I hope that in that aspect, you can see my dramatic interpretation of that score. And in the next song, Le Nuage, The Cloud, this was a really funny one. This is a poem by Théophile Gautier. Théophile Gautier, also kind of in the same spirit as Elgilis, that last poet I was just talking to you about. He loved Oriental exoticism. So back then, in the turn of the century, it was like all the craze, and in France, they thought that they could use Oriental exoticism to heighten their musical phrasing, the referencing of the poem, and to make it more interesting for the audience members to listen to. So in Nuage, this is also, I think, 4 stanzas long, and it's a really funny story. So there's like a sultaness. So the first scene, sultaness, she starts off in the bath. No one's looking at her. She's all by herself. And, you know, we just describe her beautiful hair, and she lets down her hair, and the bubbles are all around her. And then that starts in D major. And then D minor comes, and suddenly the music shifts. And then you hear the sultan looking at her from the balcony, and everything becomes super ominous. And he says, no one can look at her except for me. But he sees the eunuch in the tower staring at her. And then the third stanza, and then the music shifts completely again, becomes D major, super hypnotic, tons of triplets, and this beautiful repetitive theme, da 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 da. You'll hear this in the piano part, and it's amazing how Martial Caillebotte reflects that. And so the cloud comes, and Théophile Gautier, when he uses clouds to reference anything, it meant witchery, ominous death, murder was going to come, and the cloud. And in the lyrics, it's very funny. If you have it in the YouTube, in the final YouTube link of this, we put the translation for you. The cloud is there, sitting on the elbows of the rainbow, looking at the Sultan, hypnotizing him. And in the 4th stanza, B minor, super chromatic, crazy, dense, rhythmic, intense music. The Sultan then kills his sultaness because no one can have her. He's full of jealousy. And at the very last couple of lines, Martial Caillebotte goes back to soft D major with beautiful ascending arpeggios as the cloud smiles and laughs and goes away. It's crazy stuff, but it's really fun to sing, and the dramatic shifts that he represents and is able to depict are amazing. And I love singing these melodies for the extra dramatic the opportunities it gave me. So I hope you like them. They're very intense, but full of 9ths, 11ths, lots of thematic material and motivic shifts. So enjoy. Keith Weber is playing the piano, and this recording was done in October. I had done it for a live stream for U of H faculty recital, because I am currently a professor at U of H, and I do own a music school in Sugar Land, where I am right now, and still singing and hopefully bringing Martial Caillebotte across the country. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope you enjoy the show.
This was extraordinary. It was everything Debbie and Gail and I and our two co-presidents, Dr. Roy Wiley and Suzanne Marion, could have dreamed of. John, thank you so much. It was extraordinary. And Dominique, thank you. I can't thank you enough. Both of your performances, your music is just sublime. For any of you who are visiting us for the first time, we hope you'll come back. And there are ways for you to find out what we're doing. We have a wonderful website at www.houstonmusicalclub.org. And on that website, it has all of our upcoming performances with our speakers and our performers. Our season will run through April, and we have some very exciting things coming up. So I hope you'll join us again. And if you would like to become a member of Tuesday Musical Club, there is a spot on the website where you can join. So thank you so much. Thank all of you, Debbie, Gail, and whoever invented Zoom. I thank you, and I wish you all a very good night.